Welcome back to the Grow Like a Mother podcast. I'm really excited that you're here today. If it's your first time listening, welcome. This is a podcast for busy moms who prioritize personal growth, self-development, and want to rediscover themselves outside of the role of mom. And one of the best ways that we can do that is to figure out intimately who we are and set boundaries around our yeses and our nos. That's what we're talking about today on the podcast with Nadja. Nadja is a self-love coach for high-achieving women. She's based in Germany, and she helps her clients recover from people-pleasing to build an aligned life based on their values. We talk about setting healthy boundaries, prioritizing our needs, building mutual connected relationships. Nadia's process is teaching clarity on personal values, healing your emotional wounds, embodying self-love on this really practical day-to-day level. She shares with us a boundary starter kit, which I'm about to go download right now. The conversation was so informative. I got so many downloads listening to the way that she describes this. Highly recommend that if you are someone who is a people pleaser, recovering people pleaser, someone who struggles with boundaries, saying no, saying yes, asking for help. If this conversation is resonant in some way, please tune in and please share it because this is a conversation that's really going to empower us and truly change our lives. So without further ado, please welcome Nadja to the Grow Like a Mother podcast. Hi, Nadja. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to chat with you. I know this conversation has been a long time coming for us to like wait for the part of the podcast where I'm talking about boundaries and we're finally here and this feels really timely for me. I'm curious though, before we get into some of the tools and the tips and the whys and the hows, can you share a little bit about what brought you to this type of work? Like why you feel so passionate about sharing with it?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I had not my magical whole awakening all at once, but I had some more or less lighter and heavier steps to realizing how important boundaries are. And the first was when I was around 29 and I had my dream job. I landed my dream job in investment banking, and my boss called me in the office and he fired me with the words, "You're not good enough."
Wow.
And soon after that, no job, no money, so no apartment any longer. And my huge network of friends just fell apart because they weren't actually friends. They were business. It was a business network. So no job, no business, no network, right? And then, yeah, my fiance broke up with me and I moved back in with my parents. And that is where I first of all realized that I was left with a lot of not good enough. And at the same time, I felt it coming before that I thought, okay, my life is so darn perfect. So why am I not super happy, excited, and, grateful for it? Why do I feel so miserable inside? But that was the moment where I first noticed that I had built a perfect life and I wasn't even sure that this life was my life, the life I truly wanted to live. And that all goes into the direction of purpose and, all these things. But in fact, it comes down to boundaries. Do we tend to rather please other people, or do we embark on the journey of getting to know ourselves intimately and daring to say no to what's not a fit, allowing to say yes to what we want to try out and just find out who we are and what we want to do with this precious life we have?
Yes. Yes to all of that. Where did you even begin? Like, did you look at books, podcasts? Like, what was that trajectory like for you in your experience?
Yeah, the first thing was that I noticed that I don't know myself. I had this situation where someone asked me, "What's your favorite flower?" And I was thinking like, I think I say sunflower because my mom always told me they are so yellow, joyful. So I said sunflower. And afterwards I asked myself, is this really my favorite flower out of all the other flowers? And I noticed, damn, I don't know what I like. I don't know who I am. I just was so busy doing everything perfectly and fulfilling expectations, being a good daughter and having a perfect career, that I lost myself completely along the way. And I think the first step is to get to know ourselves intimately. That's the first step.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it can be scary to do that. I think you're right that so many of us follow this life path where we're doing the things because we think that that is the thing that we should do. A lot of shoulds, a lot of expectations, a lot of pressure, whether it's intentional or not, from our family, from our friends, from our society. But then we stop often in midlife and say, wait a minute, I've got everything on paper, but I'm not feeling fulfilled, or I'm just not connected to this life I'm living. And I think that, I mean, this is part of what we're going to get into today, but boundaries, setting up yeses and nos that align with who you actually are, that's a really great way to start to create a life that feels true to you, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think especially as a mom, I am a mom of a 5-year-old. And before you become a mom, you think you know how raising a child is done. There's one perfect way, and if you do it right, your child will turn out perfectly and kind, and all these things. And then you get this little wonder in your life, and you notice that whatever you plan, this little human being has completely different plans. And people start to give you these advices like, you should do this, you should do that. And if you don't do this, oh, and it gets really, really complex and challenging and sometimes frustrating. And I think, especially as a mom, it's so important that we can draw kind and transparent boundaries about what is okay and what is not okay, not only for ourselves, but also for our children, for their well being, and as a role model.
Yeah, definitely. And it's hard to do because we're sort of for so many years built for this people pleasing, right? At least that was my story. I wanted to do, I wanted to show up as the one who said yes all the time, and the one who made everyone else feel comfortable, and the one who was, I sort of took my own worth and value from what other people thought of me. And I brought that into my motherhood, and I started people pleasing my kids. Is that ridiculous? They were like babies, and I was changing around everything to try to please them. And that was a big wake up moment for me. My goodness.
But I think it's not ridiculous at all. We are, especially as women, we are wired for connection and relationships. So, us as a mom wanting to please our babies is completely natural because we want them to feel loved, supported, cared for. We want to do everything so they are happy. That's natural, that's a good thing, I think. But also, and that's where it gets challenging again, we need to say no, we need to set boundaries, we need to help them manage their expectations when they are growing older, because we are probably the only person on the whole planet who would love to say yes all the time. There are a lot of people who want and will say no to them, and it's also an art to handle a no, to learn to handle that.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. You're absolutely right. And so I'm sort of seeing this conversation from two sides now. I'm seeing it from like, how do we as women, as high achieving women who want something great in our life, that we have these goals, how do we say no? And how do we deal with no in a way that models for our kids how they can then move through life with rejection as well, right? So there's two sides to the coin, but I'm really interested in diving into like, how do we start this change in it's like a reframe in our mind of being able to say no and reaching for the yes. Like, where do we even start?
I love this. Ah, that's so juicy. So the first thing is we starting getting to know ourselves really intimately. And for me, that was ridiculous because it was going to a public garden and looking at flowers. Seriously. So we might start with really ridiculous and tiny steps, but it builds up on time. And we need to give ourselves the grace that we are evolving and developing human beings on this earth. So even though I might know myself completely today, something happens tomorrow, and there are other parts about myself that I need to discover. So this is an ongoing journey. We are changing, and that's okay. That's the first step. And I think the mindset shift that we need to become aware of is that every time we are saying yes, it's costing us something. That's not a bad thing, but it's costing our time, our patience, maybe the emotional capacity we have. It might cost us money or other resources. And we need to manage our resources wisely, because if we don't, and I know as moms, we know this very, very well, because if we don't manage our resources well, at the end of the day, we are sitting there being empty, being drained, being impatient, being tired, being exhausted, and starting to be mean to people who don't deserve this. And then we feel awful about ourselves, and then we have a circle that's not getting better from here. So that's a crucial part, that we learn to manage our resources well. And the first step is that if I need to set a boundary, then I can ask myself, what is saying yes costing me? So that I have a fact, I have a, if we invest something, we ask, how much money does it cost? And then we evaluate, is it worth it or not? Do I want to spend this money or not? And we can do the same with all the other resources we have. That's the first step. So the next thing is, if we notice that, yeah, okay, it's costing me, I don't know, 2 hours of my time. I enjoy being with this person, so I'm willing to invest it. It's worth it to me. Then we can say yes. Then that's the easy part, right? But then we made a conscious decision. If we notice, no, I don't want to invest this. No, maybe I don't have this resource, or maybe I don't have enough of it. So Christmas time, if I'm not abundant in money in this season, I can't buy expensive gifts for everyone. So that's just a fact, and then I need to handle it well. If I'm short on time, I might not help my friend move this weekend because I unfortunately might not have the time available. So, and I think one of the best things to say no in a way that's aligned is putting ourselves in the shoes of the person who's receiving the no, the boundary. So if I would be in the other person's shoes, how would I love this boundary be communicated to me? Because you probably can relate to this, that you say yes even though you wanted to say no initially, and then resentment is building up, and that's repeating, and then you come to a point where you start snapping at people and avoiding people or being mean and harsh, and that's not who you are. That's just because you ignored yourself for so long that something negative built up inside of you. So that's not what we want to do. And with finding a way and communicating our boundary in a way that's aligned with who we are. So we might do this very kindly or very transparently. There are so many different ways. There's not one right way to communicate a boundary. Your boundary, the same boundary, will be communicated differently by you than it will be by me, and that's totally okay. So that's the next step, to phrase it in a way that we would feel good in receiving it.
Yeah, I feel that one. It's funny because I resonate so much with everything that you're saying, and I love the idea of considering our resources, what is actually available to us. Even if we can't, even if we're not at the place yet where we know what truly and intimately who we are, what we want, what feels good and aligned, you don't need to be at that point yet to be able to look at the resources available and understand whether you have capacity.
Yeah.
And one thing also that I'll just say, that I don't know if anyone else feels like this or if this happens to them, but for me, I often will say, and I still do this, I'll say yes. And even if it's something I want to do without considering my capacity and my resources, and then I will cancel and say no when I realize, or move it, and it's really a disservice to the person that I'm trying to help. It kind of counteracts the initial wanting to help because I'm screwing it up by saying no later or moving it, and that impacts their schedule. I don't know. Do you see that a lot? Do your clients ever do that, or
Yes,
is it
yes,
just me?
yes, I do. I see this with my clients and also with myself. And the thing is, we are moms. And there has been a different time when I was single. So it was really easy to plan my day, my life, my energy, because I didn't hear, Mom, Mom, look at me, Mom, I need, Mom here, Mom there, 100 times a day. So my emotional capacity and my energy level was completely different to this nowadays. And, things change. And it might be that I have said yes to something and I notice when the time is approaching to fulfill my yes that I no longer have these resources. And that's completely normal. I think it's about how, again, we communicate this. And I can very kindly and openly say, I said yes, and I'm really sorry that I need to change my mind, but I don't feel well. I'm totally tired. I need time for myself. I hope you understand. Or I don't know, my child fell sick, or I noticed my child needs me more than I thought it would do. So we do not go to the play date. We rather have some exclusive time because I notice this is what my child needs right now. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. And here's one thing I have to mention that's so important. We only have one responsibility, and that is communicating our boundary in a kind way. And kind doesn't mean nice. Kind means in consideration of the other person's feeling as well as our own. We do not have a responsibility for how the other person is actually receiving our boundary. And there are people who will always be annoyed, angry, and not understanding at all with getting a boundary. And that's not our fault. If your counterpart is a narcissist, you can say no in how many ways? None of this way will ever be right. But that is not your thing. If you set an aligned boundary and communicated it well, your job is done.
How do we hold that boundary when it feels uncomfortable if we're getting pushback from the other person?
The first thing I, in most cases, do is I repeat it. And I say, I just said, and then I repeat exactly what I did. For most people, that's enough. Some people will push back again, and they will try as hard as they can. Then I will repeat again and said, did you notice that I just said this and that? That is pretty clear, I think. But there are people who will still push back. And then I will be very, very direct. I will say them, I'm setting a boundary, that's not okay for me. You are pushing back. That's not cool. It's important that if we are in a relationship, that we respect our boundaries. And I understand you might be annoyed or it might be an inconvenience for you. I'm sorry for that, but that doesn't change my boundary.
Mm-hmm. And somehow it's just now dawning on me that we can literally say the words to the other person, I am setting a boundary right now, because it might not be clear to them, or if you've been, for lack of a better word, wishy-washy in the past, if you haven't held your boundaries, they may not think that you're serious.
Yes.
But saying the word, I am setting a boundary right now, will hopefully help to illuminate what is happening in the conversation to the other person, and also give you that sort of power to
Yeah.
remember, like, oh yeah, right. I'm trying to set a boundary here and I'm trying to stick with it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. And it's a matter of practice. When you're setting a boundary for the first time, it feels uncomfortable, like everything else we do. So it gets better with practice. And when you have a lot of practice, you build your inner confidence, self-confidence, and you have skills in this area. What I do is when I have the feeling that somebody's trying to manipulate me, I make this transparent. I had a friend who had very narcissistic tendency, and I told her, what you're doing right now is trying to manipulate me, and I don't like this. And she said, yeah, of course I'm gonna try to manipulate you. Like, yeah, okay, at least we are honest, but my no is a no. So that's
Yeah.
it.
Oh, that's too funny. That's too funny. I want you to be able to share with the audience about your boundary kit, the
Yeah.
toolkit that you offer. Can you share with us a little bit about that? We're going to make sure we put it in the show notes. So if you're listening and you're curious, don't worry, it'll be there. But I'd love for you, Nadia, to just tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I love to. Thank you. So, I have created a free boundary kit, and in this kit, I guide you through the whole process of setting a boundary that is effective and that also feels good on both sides. So, I guide you through the 8 steps. It sounds a lot, but it's pretty simple. So, that we talked about realizing what is saying yes costing me. So we start with this, and I guide you through the whole process, including the pushback, so that you can work this. It's a little checklist. It's a 2-pager, but it's a very big scripture. So don't worry about this one. So that you can take this and work through it whenever you need to set a boundary and you don't feel comfortable and you want some guidance. And I'm also giving you a couple of sentences that you can have at the tip of your tongue whenever you need and want to say no without ruffling any feathers. So if you are struggling with setting boundaries, and if you think maybe I miss a skill, or I don't know when I need to say yes and when I need to say no, already this is challenging me, then the Boundary Starter Kit is your place to start and go.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. It sounds like something I want to print out and like put up in front of my computer, just to have, because it's that consistency. It feels a little bit like a safety net. Because I don't know about others, but I feel often like a deer in the headlights, and I intend to go in and say no, and then I'm in the situation and I'm like, oh, I don't remember how. So
Yeah,
having a resource like that available is super handy. Thank you for sharing that with the audience. And I think that if they've made it to the end of the episode and they're curious and this is a conversation that they feel connected to, then this is something they're gonna have to go and download and have as like a continuation to this conversation for sure.
yes, absolutely. And when, as you said, like feeling in the spotlight, when you are prepared, it's so much easier to say no because you have managed your emotions before and you have already prepared yourself to handle a possible pushback. So it's absolutely handy to prepare and do this.
Yeah, absolutely. As with most things in life, right? Preparation. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Oh my gosh, this has been so informative. I appreciate you so much and your time coming on and sharing your wisdom. Before we go, though, is there anything important to share that we haven't touched on or anything you want the audience to walk away with today?
Oh, yes, especially as a mom. Something that is so dear to my heart is that there are so many rules on how to raise your kids right, what you need to do, what you shouldn't do, what you should do. And, I think that we as moms, we know our babies best. We have the best interest of our children at heart. And, our mom intuition, that's absolutely the most valuable tool to guide us through decisions. And if you do not like somebody else to hold your baby, then don't allow it. That's absolutely okay. There is no right and there is no wrong. We are so different, each of us and our babies, that what is okay for one mom and her baby might not be for the other. So be courageous and brave enough to follow your own intuition and do what feels aligned and right for you, because that is what is right for you and your babies.
Yes. Thank you for naming that. That is one of the fastest ways to understand who you are is listening to that inner voice we call intuition and honoring it because it'll get louder. If it's like, oh, she listened, she trusted me, she spoke my, yeah, okay. And then that will come more naturally and louder to you and you will develop that skill, but you have to be brave enough to trust it, to listen and to act in
Yeah, I
accordance.
love I love so much that you mentioned this because it gets louder. It might be a tiny little voice, but it comes to a point where it's so obvious and clear, like a friend standing at your side, and we need this friend.
Yes, we do. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you again. This has been such a pleasure. And to the listeners, please go check out Nadia's website, her Instagram, get that free toolkit, and connect with her and let her know that you heard about her here on the Grow Like a Mother podcast. And until next week, keep on growing like a mother.